Hello, I'm Beth, and this is Social Leopards. I can't believe I get to say this. Welcome to Season 5. It feels good to be back and starting another season. As I mentioned at the end of the last episode, the theme for this time around is conversations with myself, and I intend to revisit some topics that I feel have more to cover. But everything I have to say is related to navigating this social jungle that we call life. Being an adult can be fulfilling and meaningful, but also deeply confusing. There are bills to pay, relationships to manage, emails to write, groceries to remember, and a constant stream of decisions that sometimes make us want to lie face down on the floor for a few minutes. It's not always pretty, right? And that's the kind of point of the season. We're getting real about what it means to grow, to stumble, and to keep showing up anyway. So today I want to start with something that lives quietly inside all of us, but often gets a little too much airtime, the inner critic. You know that voice, right? The one that whispers, or maybe it even shouts sometimes, things like, "Why would you say that? Everyone's doing this better than you. Don't mess this up." It's that part of your brain that somehow manages to sound both smug and panicked at the same time. It's sharp, it's persistent, and it shows up exactly when you least need it. But I need you to know this. That voice isn't in charge of your life. Now, let's be honest. Adulting isn't easy for any of us. Even the people who make it look effortless have their messy days, their missed deadlines, their awkward moments. But what makes the difference is how we handle those moments when the inner critic does show up. Do we hand it the microphone, or do we take a breath, acknowledge it, and then move forward on our own terms? A few seasons back, Bea and I had a wonderful conversation with Melissa Hepner. She said something that really stuck with me. She said, the goal isn't to silence your inner critic, it's to understand its job. Because that voice, as frustrating as it is, exists for a reason. It's trying, although sometimes it's trying kind of badly, to keep us safe. It's wired to prevent embarrassment, failure, or rejection, but in doing that, it can end up stifling growth, confidence, and creativity. The trick isn't to fight it, it's to manage it. When that critical voice pops up, you can say, "Hey, I hear you. Thanks for looking out for me, but I've got this." It's a way of acknowledging that part of yourself without letting it take the wheel. And I'll admit that's easier said than done, because the inner critic is sneaky. It doesn't always show up as obvious self-criticism. Sometimes it comes disguised as perfectionism, or procrastination, or comparison. It tells us we're not ready yet, or that we should wait until we have it all figured out. Let me tell you, if we all waited until we had it figured out, the world would be standing still. A few days ago, I had one of those moments that reminded me how persistent that inner critic can be. I was replying to an email. It was something pretty simple, and I thought I had a clear understanding of what the person was asking. I fired off my response and went about my day, and then about an hour later, something started to feel, off. You know that slight pit in your stomach feeling when your intuition whispers, "Hey, check again." So I reread the email. And sure enough, I had misunderstood the entire thing. Instantly, that little voice came roaring in. "Really? That was careless. You should have double-checked. Now you look like you don't know what you're doing." And here's the part that frustrates me. It wasn't that big of a deal. I replied, clarified my mistake, and within a few minutes, it was resolved. But emotionally, my brain was still spiraling. Why? Because that voice, that inner critic, doesn't judge based on facts. It reacts to feelings. It's triggered by embarrassment or the fear of not being seen as capable, and it can take something small and blow it up into a full-blown internal drama. Afterward, I took a deep breath and thought, okay, what really happened here? The truth was simple. I made a mistake. I fixed it. The world didn't end. But my inner critic, it acted like I did. And that moment reminded me how much power that voice can have if we don't challenge it. So how do we challenge it? First, I think we start with awareness. catch it in the act. The next time that inner dialogue starts, pause for a moment and ask yourself, is this voice actually helping me or just scaring me? Most of the time, it's the latter. Then we move on to compassion. It sounds small, but self-compassion changes everything. It's not about letting yourself off the hook. It's about understanding that you're human. Mistakes aren't proof of failure. They're proof that you're trying. And finally, practice perspective. I like to ask myself, would I talk to a friend this way? Because if the answer is no, then I don't need to talk to myself that way either. Again, easier said than done. Here's something else that helps, though. Remember that your inner critic is often shaped by old stories. Maybe it sounds like a teacher who told you you'd never be good at something, or a parent who meant well but pushed too hard. Or maybe it's the echo of a workplace that valued perfection over people. Those experiences leave imprints, but they don't have to define how we speak to ourselves now. Every time you choose self-kindness over self-criticism, you're rewriting that script. You're teaching your brain a new pattern. And I want to pause here because I know that can sound a little easier said than done. It's not about flipping a switch overnight. It's about making small, consistent choices that build resilience. Let's say you've had a rough day. You dropped the ball on a project, or you said something awkward in a meeting, or you forgot an important deadline. Instead of spiraling into, I'm such an idiot, try shifting to, okay, that didn't go how I wanted, but I can fix it. That's a micro shift in language, but it's powerful. Over time, these little moments train your brain to stay balanced under pressure. The inner critic thrives on black and white thinking. I'm either great or I'm terrible. But the truth is, most of life happens in the gray. That's where learning and growth live. And that's where adulting really happens too, because being an adult isn't about getting everything right. It's about learning how to recover with grace when things don't go according to plan. Here's another thing that helps quiet that inner critic. Surround yourself with voices that lift you up. Seek out people who remind you of your strengths, who give honest feedback, but from a place of care. That could be a mentor, a friend, a sibling, someone who helps you see yourself through a more balanced lens. When you spend time with people who genuinely believe in you, it starts to rub off. You begin to internalize their confidence inside of you until it becomes your own. And if you don't have those voices nearby right now, that's okay. Sometimes we have to borrow encouragement until we can build it ourselves. That might mean listening to a podcast, like this one, reading a book, or following creators who speak to you in empowering ways. There's no shame in needing reminders of your own worth. We all need them. Something I've learned over the years is that self-criticism doesn't go away entirely. It just gets quieter when you stop giving it your full attention. The more you respond with calm and clarity, the less energy it takes. You might still hear it say, don't mess this up, or you're not ready, but over time, you'll start answering back. Maybe I will mess up. Maybe I won't. Either way, I'll learn. That's how you build confidence. Not by silencing fear, which is really what your inner critic is after all, but by learning to move forward with it sitting quietly in the back seat. Here's another thing I want to point out. Sometimes the inner critic gets loudest when you're about to do something brave. When you're stretching beyond your comfort zone, starting a new chapter, or putting yourself out there. That voice ramps up because it senses risk. It's trying to keep you in familiar territory. So the next time you notice that inner critic getting louder, take it as a sign. You're growing. You're pushing edges. You're about to learn something new about yourself. If we reframe the inner critic as a signal instead of an enemy, we start to take back control. Now, there's another layer to this conversation that's important. Sometimes our inner critic isn't just about self-talk, it's about comparison. And wow, do we live in a world that feeds that habit? We scroll through social media and it looks like everyone else has their whole life together. The polished careers, the happy families, the aesthetic apartments. It's easy to start thinking, what's wrong with me? But remember, you're comparing your behind the scenes to someone else's highlight reel. No one posts their chaos in real time. We all curate what we share. So when that inner critic starts to use comparison as ammunition, remind yourself that you're not behind. You're just on your own timeline. That's one of the kindest things you can say to yourself. My path doesn't have to look like anyone else's. If you take a moment to look back, I bet you'll notice something. You've probably already overcome more than your inner critic ever gave you credit for. Think about the situations that once you thought you couldn't handle, but you did. The times you adapted, the times you learned, the times you figured things out. That's your evidence. And the more you collect that evidence, the stronger your self-trust becomes. Self-trust is the quiet antidote of self-criticism. It's the steady voice that says, I've handled hard things before. I can handle this too. That doesn't mean you'll always feel confident. Sometimes you'll still doubt yourself, but it means that even in those moments, you'll keep moving forward anyway. That's the real measure of progress. Not the absence of fear, but the decision to keep trying in spite of it. So if your inner critic has been loud lately, try giving yourself a different kind of pep talk. Something like, I'm learning. I'm allowed to make mistakes. I'm doing my best with what I know right now. I can always course correct. These aren't just feel-good affirmations, they're mindset resets. They remind your brain that growth doesn't require perfection. And maybe that's the essence of adulting, right? It's not about never dropping the ball. It's about learning how to pick that ball back up with humility and humor and self-respect. When you can meet your imperfections with kindness, you start to create a kind of internal safety, a place where you can show up as yourself without fear of judgment. And when you feel safe inside yourself, everything else gets a little easier. Your relationships, your work, your boundaries, they all flow from that same foundation of self-trust. So if you're listening today and thinking, I really need to quiet that voice inside my head, start small. Start with one choice today that reflects kindness. It could be forgiving yourself for something minor. It could be letting yourself rest instead of pushing through exhaustion. It could be acknowledging your effort instead of only your outcomes. Each of those moments teaches your brain that you are safe to be human. And that's really what we're doing here. We're learning how to be fully human while navigating this messy, wonderful business of adulting. So let's make this our mantra for the week. I can listen to my inner critic without believing everything it says. You're not broken for having that voice. We all have it. But you are powerful enough to respond to it differently. And when you do, little by little, you'll start hearing another voice rise up. The one that says, you're capable, you're learning, you're enough. That's the voice we want to give the microphone to. Thanks for spending this time with me today. Season 5 is going to be full of these kinds of conversations. Real talk about growth, grace, and all the things that make adulting such an unpredictable adventure. Remember, you're not behind, you're not failing, and you're definitely not alone. You're learning how to build a life that feels like your own, and that's something to be proud of. Until next time, take a deep breath, give yourself a little credit, and remember, you've got this. Take care.